The winters are cold, everything freezes, the nights are dark, and the summers are hot and buggy.
Hello, welcome to our channel. We're all about sharing our adventures and experiences around our homestead and off-grid cabin here on our 40 acres in the wilderness of Ontario, Canada.
We enjoy life around the cabin, exploring, canoeing, hiking, campfire cooking, gardening, and sharing our love of nature.
If you haven't done so yet, consider subscribing and click the little notification bell so you won't miss anything. Right here on Cabin Life with Glenn and Maureen. Hi, I'm Glenn.
And I'm Maureen, and we have some off-grid stories and a few tips to share with you while we cook up a hearty vegetable beef soup.
You know, we're on-grid and off-grid here. We happen to enjoy the best of both worlds, the off-grid cabin and a homestead which is powered by the grid. We use propane for cooking and warmth, and we have a drilled well, and we get our drinking water from a spring. We knew the off-grid lifestyle could be challenging, but we also knew that with research and preparation, it could be a very fulfilling and rewarding lifestyle. It's all about quality of life.
Yep, and today we're cooking up an easy and nutritious soup with carrots, onions, potatoes, some veggies, and beef.
Yes, indeed, leftovers turned into that soup from that poor man's roast beef that we cooked in the Dutch oven just the other night. Check the video out right here. Well, I think that soup should be about ready to go.
I think so. Winters are cold. Everything freezes. We're going to share some of our experiences and more of our stories, challenges, and lessons we learned along the way to settling in on our homestead here in our 40 acres in the wilderness. We're always aware of the weather here. We learned right on the beginning to keep up on the forecast and an eye to the sky because things can change so quickly. And in the winter, it can be bitterly and dangerously cold.
Yeah, this one time we were snowed in during a 3-day blizzard where the roads were impassable. About 4 feet of snow fell, so we couldn't even get to town for supplies. Do you remember that, Maureen?
Yeah, I do, but we made it through okay, but it was dicey and a lesson to keep stocked up on supplies and water.
Oh, and cream for coffee.
Yep, and don't forget that cream. With being so remote, unfortunately delivery services don't come out this far. When the weather was good, it was only an hour's drive to town for shopping, but I didn't take into account the poor roads and the additional travel time. With only 8 hours of sun in the winter and not wanting to drive at night, I had to get out early to get back before dark. Most regular shopping trips take about 5 hours return on good days, but more like 8 hours when the weather or roads don't cooperate.
Yeah. Remember the time, Maureen, when we went into town shopping and then we went visiting and we didn't leave until mid-evening and a winter storm blew in as we headed down the road, whiteout conditions, and we were undecided whether we should turn back, but we just kept on going. It was a 5-hour drive that normally would take like 1 hour. And even though that we were prepared with emergency supplies, breaking down on the side of the road that night would not have been good. And this is no joke. Skin can freeze in a matter of minutes in this neck of the woods in the winter right here in Ontario, Canada. Because we're living in such a remote area, especially through the winter in those extreme conditions, one of the things we wanted to ensure was that we had a place to go in the event of a fire. We didn't want to be stranded outside at minus 20 below with nowhere to go. So when we were in the cabin, we had the van or the RV to go to. And once we were in our new homestead, down the cabin trail, we had the cabin as an emergency shelter to fall back on.
Hey Glenn, you know how purple is my favorite color?
Mm-hmm.
What rhymes with purple?
Doesn't rhyme.
In the cold northern winter, everything freezes. Everything freezes in the northern winters, and we learn to adapt quickly. Like something as basic as groceries. When the temperatures were really cold, groceries needed to be organized to be hauled up to the cabin before they began to freeze. Produce, then dairy, then canned goods, and then the rest, and of course the frozen stuff last. Some days, speed was essential. One time it was bitterly cold out, and some of the vegetables began to freeze by the time they got to the cabin. After that, perishables were put in a good closed box in the sleigh to get hauled up to the cabin trail to the cabin.
That's right. And no, we did not have a snowmobile, so it was on our own steam, hauling groceries and supplies and big jugs of water up that cabin trail here. Sometimes we made about 4 trips up and down the hill, pulling stuff on that sled.
And making all those trips back and forth after a long, tiring day of shopping and being on the road, those trips dragging that sled up and down that hill got old pretty fast. But I got into shape doing it, so it was a benefit, really.
Hey, Maureen, you know why the old guy fell in the well? Because he couldn't see that well.
Night is dark at night. Like really dark. We started to lose our light around 4 p.m. and it was totally dark by 5. In the van and RV, using the headlamp was okay. It didn't bother me, but when we first moved into the cabin, using only a headlamp for light was annoying and not very practical in the long term. So we went on the hunt for alternative powered lights that would light up the entire area and found battery and solar powered lights that were great improvement. What a difference it made. It really uplifted the atmosphere and made things more manageable.
As spring came and we settled in around the property, clearing the land, moving dirt, hauling logs out of the bush, I was pushing myself pretty hard to get things done, and one day I overdid it. I injured my back. I had some jobs to do the next day, so I just kept on going anyway, and that's when I messed myself up big time. I went beyond my limits, and that set me back about 2 years. And during that time, we had to be extra careful that Maureen didn't end up injuring herself, or else we'd be dead in the water. So, push your envelope, but don't push it too far. In hindsight, having some heavy equipment would have been handy and a smarter way to go, but that wasn't the case with no equipment around, so we just did what we could with what we had.
One thing we learned along the way was when something goes wrong, figure out why. Remember when the heat stopped in the middle of the night? It was like minus 30 Celsius at 3 a.m. The propane tanks got changed, but by the next day we noticed that the 20-pound tanks still had propane in them. So why did the heater quit?
Well, after talking to the propane supplier, we learned that the 20-pound propane tanks don't do well in temperatures below minus 25. So the propane doesn't get a chance to boil in those low temperatures. So that was a real eye-opener.
Since we've been here on the land, we've done a lot of research and we've become familiar with the systems around the homestead. It's definitely been a learning
It
experience.
sure has.
Although we connected to the grid, it was good to learn about alternative sources of energy like solar and wind because we can change over if we want to.
Hey, Maureen, some windmills, they like a particular genre of music. They're big metal fans.
Summers are hot and buggy. Working outside in the heat of the summer can be challenging because bug jackets are too warm while working and they're hard to see through at times. We don't like putting on chemical bug repellents, so we just deal with it. In the city, some of those repellents and gels might work against the small amount of mosquitoes, but here in the wilderness, where they're so thick, in our experience, many of those remedies just aren't adequate repellents. We've tried some of the home remedies like gels and herbs, and while some work, most don't and aren't worth a bother slathering them all over our exposed skin, and some are just hard to wash off. Best way to attempt to beat the bugs is to pick your times to work outside in the cool of the mornings and the evenings, or in the blistering hot of the midday where it'll burn them off and send them back into the bush. The wind helps, and smudge fires help too, especially against mosquitoes.
And sometimes a nice cold drink in the cool shade helps too.
Yeah, and we figured out too how to deal with summer heat depending on the weather and the sun. During the summer, we open up all the windows at night and close them before the heat of the day, and closing the curtains to keep the sun out to keep it cooler inside.
It's a good thing that we have well-insulated buildings for the winter and the summer, and it keeps it very comfortable year-round.
During challenging times, we try to find the positive because it's easy to let that negative creep in. So we try to keep it positive and get through the challenge.
And when that challenge is all behind us, it's just a matter of plugging forward. It's a learning experience. That soup smells awesome, Maureen. It really does. Oh, yeah. Stick around. We're just about to serve the soup. Well, that's all for this time. We'll see you next time. I'm Glenn.
I'm Maureen.
Over and out.
Take care.